Marvel Rivals is not a competitor to Overwatch, at least not in the way that maybe you think it is. And hear me out, this isn't just cope from an Overwatch player, as I've been playing both games and enjoying both games. I've honestly probably been playing more Rivals the last few days than I have Overwatch. But since the release of Rivals, it's been nearly impossible to have a conversation about either game without the other game being brought up. Which, I mean, makes a lot of sense, as the games do have a lot of glaring similarities, from character design to game modes to even just being a 6v6 hero shooter. And I think most of the comparisons are completely harmless, and honestly, there's a lot of content gold being made around their similarities. But at a certain point, when you can't have a conversation about Rivals without someone piping up about how much worse Overwatch is, and you can't have a conversation about Overwatch without someone bringing up Rivals, it becomes unhealthy for both games and both communities. And I wanted to throw my 2 cents in on it. I don't say that Rivals isn't an Overwatch competitor because they don't share a player base, because they absolutely very much do. I say that because they are foundationally completely different games designed for 2 completely different types of players. I don't think that people love to hear this, but Overwatch is objectively a pretty competitively balanced game. It's been clear since launch that the entire goal of Overwatch 2 has been to create a more balanced and controlled environment than we had in Overwatch 1. Whereas Rivals is designed to be a much more casual and chaotic environment, where every character is just a little bit broken in their own way. If anything, sharing far more DNA with Overwatch 1 than with Overwatch 2. And admittedly, I didn't like Overwatch 1 because of that design philosophy, because so many characters felt gimmicky and frustrating to play against. Something that in Overwatch 2, especially after 2 years of balancing and reworks, I really don't feel anymore, outside of a handful of characters that I fundamentally despise. Meanwhile, with Rivals from day one, there were characters that, while maybe fun to play, were immediately miserable to play against. And to be clear, I'm not saying that as an inherently negative thing. Just because I don't like that game design as much, there are clearly many people who do. There's a reason Overwatch 1 was so popular in its prime. But it is objectively polar opposite game design. There is a smorgasbord of characters in Rivals with very high skill floors, making them much easier to get value out of and feel engaged in a match even if you're not that great at the game. Whereas in Overwatch, it's much easier to punish even the most unskilled characters. In Rivals, there's plenty of characters with ults that can easily net you 4 kills or more with minimal effort put in, something that's much less common now in Overwatch, all of which makes the game much more enjoyable for a casual audience. Meanwhile, there's also characters with nearly limitless skill expression, arguably more than even the most skilled characters in Overwatch, making it all around a less controlled environment than Overwatch. And while I personally appreciate many of the changes that came with Overwatch 2 to make it less chaotic and frustrating, I do understand how it took the fun away for some people, which is why I think the games being so different is an incredibly good thing. It gives players a choice to play whichever style of game they like more, instead of being miserable playing a game they don't really enjoy or feeling stuck playing Overwatch because it's the only game that really fits that role. They actually have a choice and a game to go to now. But it also means that these games are not one-to-one competitors, nor is Rivals going to kill Overwatch, as the 2 games are vying for the hearts of 2 completely different types of players. And while there will always be a shared audience and people who play both games, I imagine that crossover will shrink as the honeymoon phase of Rivals wears off and people decide which style of game they prefer and want to play more. At the end of the day, any normal person should be rooting for both games to be succeeding, as having both of these games do well is good for the gaming space as a whole, and what competition they do have should only push both games to become better, benefiting both communities. But in all the discourse, it can feel like people are more concerned with Overwatch failing than with Rivals succeeding, which will only hurt Rivals in the long run. If you love Marvel Rivals, then talk about what you love about it, not about what you hate about Overwatch. And it's not that all the negativity surrounding Overwatch is invalid. But I think that people struggle to separate their very valid hate for Blizzard, the corporation, and for Overwatch, the game. Given the conditions they've had to work through, I think the devs behind Overwatch have delivered us a pretty damn good player experience with consistent updates and balancing and clear communication on why they make certain decisions, Even if I don't agree with all of them, at least they're telling us why they're doing things. And ultimately, it's not the devs' fault for the scuffed launch of Overwatch 2, nor is it their fault for Blizzard cutting the entire lore team or scrapping the promised PvE content that the devs had worked on for years and basically had finished. You can hate Blizzard all you want because they deserve it, but I don't think that makes it fair to prey on Overwatch's downfall, and I especially don't think it's healthy for Rivals if you're only hoping for Rivals to succeed based solely on the premise of Overwatch dying. And personally, I only hope both games continue to go down their very different, very separate design decisions, and I hope they don't ever try to become each other or put themselves in a position where they would be direct competitors, because then, no matter what, part of the player base is losing out on what they love about either game.